All right. Now we should be recording. Sure.
Says we're recording.
Nice.
All right. Well, seeing that it's 12:30, we'll go ahead and start. This session will be for those of you that may have sat in on Mike and Stevens earlier. This session they kind of covered a lot of the different resources that we have and some of the EUs and stuff like that. We're going to cover more some of the foundational things and some of the bigger resources, and then some different opportunities that we have. And I see, hold on one second. All right, Stephen Morsette will be joining us here momentarily. He got stuck in traffic on his way back from lunch, evidently. So, but he'll be jumping on, but he's going to be near the end, kind of talking about the website. So I'll go ahead and get started, Mike, if you want to go to the next slide. Yeah, so so basically, I think most people know that the reason that we have this unique and very cool Indian education for all requirement in Montana is because of our 1972 Constitution. And basically says that as a state, we recognize the unique and distinct cultural heritage of our tribes, and that in our educational goals, we need to preserve their cultural integrity. So thank you again for being here on a Saturday and helping to achieve that goal. And then, you know, it was kind of ambiguous, you know, until 1999, and then it was put into law that said that all students, it's not just for Indian students, but all students should be encouraged to learn about Montana Indians. And so, you know, all this work that you do with young people out there, I like to say it helps them understand who Montana Indians were and are today. And that's something that'll be passed down through the generations, and we can get to a better place in how we view each other and have true healing. So thank you again for being part of this work. Go ahead and go to the next slide if you would, please. So yeah, the nuts and bolts of Indian Ed for All, we don't really have standards, so to speak, but really it's these essential understandings. And what I try to stress to teachers is really know these. And you can know them on a base level, but you can also know them on a deeper level. But the more of a handle you have on them and more understanding you have, the easier it is for you to, just as you're looking at what you're planning to teach, looking at how you can bring these into your lesson and you know, bring one of the essential or multiple essential understandings into your lesson. Sometimes you may have to change you know, the material, the content that you're using, but really we want you to be able to just stress these to your students, and you know, try to make sure that you're covering all of them. And as you're talking about you know, like planning, curriculum planning and alignment, you know, it's good to check with other teachers and say, you know, what are you doing for IEFA? Which essential understandings are you going to be covering? You know, if you're covering those ones, I'll cover these ones. I have this lesson where I'm going to do EUs, you know, 3, 5, and 7 or whatever. So there's 7 different ones, but a lot of them do overlap. For example, you know, EU4 and EU7, you know, there's a lot around sovereignty in both of those. So Mike Jetty likes to say there's 4 basic themes to the essential understandings. They're diversity, culture, history, and sovereignty. I see Stephen's here. Thanks for making her back, Stephen. So yeah, we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. And I guess anything you guys want to add before on the EUs?
No, just that we've got a lot of resources for you out there to increase your own background knowledge if you're not comfortable with them. So there's some good information out there to help you with your implementation regarding those essential understandings. So
yeah, when we get to some of our PD stuff, we'll talk more about that too. So another thing, basically to be an accredited school that provides a quality education in the state of Montana, you should have some IEFA in your curricula. It says this is important wording, a particular emphasis on Montana Indians It doesn't mean that you can only teach about Montana tribes. You can teach about other tribes, but we certainly want every student in Montana to know all the tribes. We want them to know what reservation they're on, things like that. And now we have a third grade standard that we want them to know their name and their own tribal language. But doesn't mean that you can't teach about other tribes. We have a great lesson on, like, for example, that I worked on the Iroquois, and how they contributed to the founding of our country and the American Revolution. So, but make sure that you cover the basics with all the Montana tribes, I guess, is the main message there. All right. So the framework is a document that basically maps out exactly, how you should move forward with Indian education for all. It talks about what IEFA supports should be in your school based on demographics and location. It talks about the different approaches to multicultural education. And then it talks about 5 kind of core, domains or areas of IEFA, and those are policy, professional development, curriculum mapping, materials review and selection, and then content integration. And so if you're not familiar with this document, I highly recommend that you check it out. There should be a copy in your library. It's also on right on our IEFA landing page on our website. There's a PDF of it. But again, it's designed to be a very practical, useful document that really helps you get started, and or if you're pretty familiar with IEFA, I mean, hopefully you could still learn some things from going deeper with it. And again, it's kind of where the rubber meets the road. We talk about IEFA, but how do we actually make sure that it's happening in our classrooms and in our schools? And this framework is a good roadmap for that. And I think the other thing about it is that oftentimes when people are asked to do, they're reminded about the IEFA requirement, they see it as a either or. Well, if I have to do an IEFA lesson, I'm not going to do this lesson. Or if I have to do an IEFA activity, I'm not going to do this other activity. But when you really start to understand this, it can be a more and both. And so that's really important to understand. Anything either of you gents would like to add? All right, well, we'll go to the next slide then. So yeah, our IEFA framework was built as a kind of a multicultural ed document or a strategy. And Dr. James Banks at the University of Washington is the one that his educational theory, multicultural educational theory, is kind of what's behind the way that it's laid out. And so one of the things that I like to really try to help people understand is at the highest levels of IEFA implementation, which are transformational, where students are genuinely doing a critical analysis of different, content, different events, that incorporate indigenous or tribal perspectives, and really starting to develop their own thoughts and ideas and then express those either orally or written, but in a deeper, more complex way. And then social justice is where students actually start to, take initiative to do something to make the world a better place, essentially. One of the great examples that I like to use of this was, for those of you that know where Red Lodge, Montana is, their mascot used to be the Redskins. And it was their students that started to understand how that name was hurtful, how the behavior of fans and, all the different depictions and things that go with that. And also, they were playing schools on the reservation, and they started to understand how this was hurtful. And so they led the movement to change their names. They're now the Red Lodge Rams. So that's a great example. Other examples could be, if they see something. I think in Mike's earlier presentation, he was showing a highway sign that had some biased or inaccurate information, leading a community effort to change the verbiage on a sign, or any of those types of things. What's cool about that is if you look at those skills there, these are all the skills that we want our students to have when they leave high school, right? And especially now, in a changing, ever changing world with all the technological stuff. And I mean, now we're talking about, I don't know who's heard about Chat GPT and all the stuff with that, but really it's going to require students to continue to be agile and flexible and continue to adapt to change. And, really robust IEFA instruction. This is one of the plugs I always put in, is that really robust IEFA instruction is a great way to help your students build these skills.
And I also would like to add, Zach, that Mike often mentions, he has so many great ideas, but he often mentions that, how cool would it be to change the Browning Indians, because they're Blackfeet reservation, they're on the Blackfeet reservation and primarily Blackfeet tribal members. How cool would it be to name them what their tribal name is? So they might be like, instead of Browning Indians, they might be the Browning Pecunny or Abzalika down in Hardin and Crow agency schools.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Well, and again, we'll talk about it, but there is a third grade standard out there that in the new social studies standards that all students need to know that. But yeah, I know Mike has talked about that. And again, we always say just be as tribally specific as you can, right? And so that's a good way to approach that. Ooh. Wow, we got some cool transitions there. But yeah, these are the approaches that Dr. Banks kind of lays out, and I'll just go through them kind of quickly. So when you do contributions, that's just kind of a quick aside or a quick mention about some content or some, some fact or some information about Indians. The example that I use often is like, if you're reading American, kind of your standard US history textbook, and maybe you're on the chapter on westward expansion, and it's talking about the Oregon Trail and, gold discovery in California and, kind of all the stuff that white folks were doing. And then there's a little sidebar that, maybe it has, Sitting Bull or somebody like that. It just kind of quickly reference, maybe talking to a brief bio. So it provides that information, but it doesn't really change anything within the, kind of the structure or the content. It's just kind of an aside. And, sometimes like in our framework, it mentions that can be almost like tokenism. But as long as you're sharing good, authentic, accurate information, I think it's okay to do the contributions approach, especially if you're just beginning and you're just trying to figure out, you want to do something. Something I used to do, just a basic thing. I used to, every day in my class, I'd have a Montana trivia question. And about, once or twice a week, I'd have one of my trivia questions. I just make sure it was something about, a Montana tribe or, famous Montana tribal member or something like that. Just a good reminder for students that there's, tribal folks out there, there's positive things. But really you want to get, you want to go beyond that. When you get into additive, that's where you might do like almost like like a good example of that would be if you're doing something on World War II and you do a day or two on Navajo code talkers or something like that. Again, it's a great thing to do, but it might come at this, this either or kind of approach, right? So you did the code talkers, but you didn't talk about something else that you usually cover. And maybe you feel like, oh, I didn't get to cover that because I did some for IEFA. Always thinking about how you can bring those things together. And that's when you get to more of that, that transformational approach is where, you have some tribally specific or, some content where you're trying to teach those same skills that you would be teaching and same kind of concepts you'd be teaching with the other, but you're doing it through an IEFA lens. And again, that's when students really start to see things in a different way. I love like Mike always shares some of the student reactions to 100 years from students in Helena, because that was transformational for them to understand that whole thing in that case and what it meant. And so when you get to that level, it's rewarding too. You start to see the things changing with your students and their perspective, and they get excited. And then I kind of already referenced the social justice, but again, that's kind of the highest level of multicultural education is when students start to take the initiative to make the world a better place.
Yeah, and just to add into that, whatever you can do to make it a seamless integration, try and strive for that. But like what Zach said, if you're doing a unit or just kind of a single thing, that's great too. As long as you're working on it, and it's a process. So, and it'd be really cool to see folks get the social justice too, and start doing some real advocacy for some of these issues. And we have seen some of that. So, great little model though for showing that progression.
Yeah. But obviously, if you in our framework, it talks about all of these in a lot more detail. All right, yeah, you can go ahead and go to that next one, Mike. Yeah, so I'll show the supports on the next slide. But again, I think oftentimes people don't understand that Indian Education for All should look different in your school, depending on your school, where you're located, what your student population is, that sort of thing. And hopefully when Stephen when he shows the website, we can point these out to you. But we have some guides that they're just downloadable Word documents that you can use to start to plan for those different supports that are appropriate for your school. It's just a good way to kind of assess what you're doing and what you're maybe not doing, and start to make plans and think about how you can make sure that you're hitting on all those supports. But generally the supports are curricular and PD, electives and exploratory offerings, and then tribal culture and language. And if we'll go to the next slide and I'll kind of explain that a little more. So you see here we have what we call X, Y, or Z school type. So most schools are going to fall under this. In Montana, most schools are going to fall under the type X, which is a small, mid-sized school, not near a reservation, has very few, if any, American Indian students. And so all of those curricular and PD supports should be, that's basically what IEFA should look like in those schools. When you get to a larger school that has a significant number of what we like to call urban districts in Montana, although that's debatable in a larger scale whether Great Falls or Billings or Missoula is urban, but for us they are, and they have significant numbers of American Indian students. And so we want to start to have some ways for all students to learn more about Native people, but also there's a question there. Is it on their OPI website? I'll address that in just a minute. But yeah, having some Native American studies offerings, allowing students to do some exploratory stuff about American Indians, and then again having supports for your American Indian students. And I don't know if anybody was on Tuffy Helgeson's presentation before lunch, but one of the things he was talking about was how part of the reason that students don't come to school or they act up in school in reservations is because they don't see themselves anywhere in what's being taught there. And so in those urban schools, it's important to start to bring that in. But it's also important to understand that like in a district like Great Falls, they might have 30 or 40 different tribes represented. So you probably couldn't do a specific tribal language, but you can let students explore those different things. And then the last is the type Z, which is the on or near reservation. And so they should also have, really deep, cultural things in their core curricular strand that are tribally specific for that tribe, as well as instruction in tribal language. Not to say that they shouldn't learn about other tribes. I know that's something we talk about a lot. They should learn about other tribes, but a lot of their core instructional teaching should really be that language and developing that sense of tribal identity, because that tribal identity and that foundation of a strong tribal identity is what's going to allow American Indian students to be successful. So this is, again, if you look at your school, where do I teach? So I know we've got a lot of folks, for example, from Billings that are on here. So you'd be, you can look at those supports, in the middle column there and be thinking about, what are we doing all these? And if we're not, how do we kind of get started? But again, we do have the planning guide. So you can go to the next slide, Mike. I just want to make sure is this on the OPI website? Yes, the framework is on the website, if that's your question. As I think I referenced, it's on our landing page. You can click on it and get the PDF, and those school level supports, I believe, are on page 11 is where there's a kind of the same thing. I've just kind of tweaked it to make a slide. So yeah, I think we can just go to the next one, Mike. So then it also, the framework breaks into those 5 domains I referenced. So policy, so all of your districts, I know there's some folks maybe from out of state, but all of you that are in a Montana district, you should have an IEFA policy that's been approved by your school board. So if you're not familiar with that, I would encourage you to take a look at that. But beyond that, I mean, I think oftentimes, if I'm being honest, I think, they develop a policy, the board adopts it, and it goes and it's filed away somewhere. And then that's kind of like, okay, we have a policy, we're done. But it should be something that people look at, that they think about how it reflects, what the things that they're going to teach or what they plan to teach with IEFA. And it could be a living, breathing thing that changes over time to meet the needs. So the more conversation that's happening, to make the policy actionable, if your district chooses to maybe do some revisions, try to have a diverse group of folks that are involved in that, and view it as a shared journey. We're not perfect. We know that this thing needs improvement. We're all going to try to do this together and learn, but we may make mistakes along the way, but that's okay. We have a comment from Destin, our buddy down the hall here. I've never seen a more comprehensive and engaging. What did he say? Oh, cool. Well, thank you, Destin. We appreciate that. It's Mike Jetty's jokes. That's what it really is.
We paid him to say that.
Yeah, that's a paid. Yeah. I'll buy you lunch after this, Destin.
But Zach mentioned, it's a process, and change takes time. But the best thing I ever seen on change was at Core Agency, Montana. There used to be a little coffee shop there called Native Grounds, and I drive through there and get coffee. But the guy had a tip jar there, and it said, "If you fear change, leave it here." So I thought that was pretty cool. So thanks.
That's true. That's not a bad joke. That
is a true story too.
Yeah, but Mike was also telling me today that when he was driving to work this morning, he saw a car with a bumper sticker that said "Honk if you like peace and quiet." So, but anyway, professional development. Again, that EU proficiency. Obviously, you're all here, but just trying to make sure that all of your folks, are getting PD, so they understand IEFA, they understand what's out there, they understand the expectations, and they feel comfortable that they can do it. And do it, reasonably well anyway. So, but again, it's really important to have accurate, tribally specific information, bias recognition strategies. Of course, I know in your guys's previous presentation that Mike and Stephen did, they used some examples of some not so good, texts and books that perpetuate bias or stereotypes. So just in your PD, developing an eye for that so that you understand that what you are using is good stuff. But again, that's the kind of thing too. You can always run stuff by us. If you have questions, we can help you with that. We even get within the OPI, we even get folks that, ask us questions about different things. And then, so then when you're doing your materials review, make sure that you're getting rid of anything that's inaccurate, not necessarily outdated. And we have a lot of, like Mike mentioned, the elk morning, we send out text. Another one, I'll just throw this out there really quick. If you Google American Indian Children's Literature Blogspot, that's a great site for books. They have all kinds of reviews and recommendations. All right, next slide, please. So yeah, so we do also have this evaluation guide. That's a great, and it's got a checklist. So again, if you're reading something and it's saying different stuff about Native people, you know, you can ask yourself, okay, who's this author? Are they a tribal member? Did they consult any tribal members? Does this feel like it's something that was vetted by Native people? You know, is there, if there's anything in there that causes a question, then you should probably dig a little deeper. And you know, I would say don't ever be afraid to ask a tribal member. You know, I think they will appreciate the fact that you're asking and understand what that means. It means that you want to do the right thing. It means that you don't want to, you know, make a mistake. You don't want to upset people. So just the act of doing the asking, I think, is a big thing. But there's a lot of great stuff in this evaluation guide. Again, this is also on our website. Should be one in your library. I'd encourage you to check it out if you're not familiar with it. And so then when you're again, as you're doing your curriculum mapping, you know, thinking about, okay, what approach am I using here? Is this additive? You know, is it transformational? You know, and then where are you maybe you're not covering IEFA in a certain place. Maybe you're not hitting all the the essential understandings. But again, that's where you can be having those conversations, you know, with your other teachers and saying, hey, what are you doing? Are you covering EU4? Are you covering 5, 6? What are you doing? So that over the course of 2 or 3 years, or, you know, at the secondary level, you know, across different classrooms that students are going in and out of, you make sure that there's IEFA happening and then all the EUs are being covered.
Yeah, we give a shout out to Bainville here, Zach. How's that?
Yeah, we got some Bainville folks here today.
No, I mean, but what they did for us, so.
Yeah, they last November they piloted some of our newest social studies lessons in their elementary, and so yeah, it was awesome. They did it. It was also, that's American Indian Heritage Month, so that was pretty cool. So we had like a great one on Native American veterans for Veterans Day. We did a whole bunch of them. So yes, and if you ever, another thing I'll just throw out there really quick, we do on our webpage, we have like you can evaluate something. So if you use a lesson or if you use a resource, if you look at our webpage, you can see it says evaluate a resource. We really would, you know, we haven't had a lot of people use that feature, but that's something that we certainly always want feedback. So if you say, hey, you know, this really stinks, I can't believe you guys you know, did this, I guess, you know, we won't be happy about that, but hopefully we can learn something from it. But hopefully you'll say something like, you know, this was a great resource, but you know, this needs more time, or, you know, I would have liked to have had, you know, a few more resources for the students to review, or whatever it is. You know, we'd like to hear that from you. So
yeah, well, we just had one of those last week where a teacher sent a note on our website saying, you know, the word Sioux, maybe you should change it to Dakota or Lakota or Nakota. And so, you know, teachers are picking up on that, but it was actually, we were referencing the Assiniboine Sioux tribes at Fort Peck, and that was a document how they referred to themselves. But we try and promote out tribal specific language. But to me, when we get those messages, it means people are paying attention and they're analyzing our materials with their critical eye themselves. So if you do notice something, let us know and we can fix it. So.
Yeah, and then when you get into your curricular integration, again, just always be trying to think about what's a tribal context, whatever it is that you're covering, to try to think about what would this look like in a tribal context, and then again, what essential understandings can I bring into it, and hopefully that's going to allow you to get to that more in both kind of place. But it's not, you know, it's not easy. It doesn't happen overnight, but when it does, I think you'll find it rewarding, and I think your students will have some really engaging learning opportunities.
And Zach mentioned tribally specific context, and I just mentioned Lakota, Dakota, Nakota. You know, 3 different groups, different dialects, but basically same culture and traditions and ceremonies. But, in Dakota for friend, we say Koda. And so Zach and Stephen, they're my Koda, they're my good friends, Mita Koda. But Lakota, the word for friend is Kola. Kola means friend. And the word for enemy in Lakota is Unkola. And if you got a Lakota friend trying to lose weight, you call him Diet Cola. And if he's got a sore throat from singing too much, you call him Ricola. But, tribal specific jokes are good too.
All right, can we go to the next slide? We got an LOL from Peggy. So yeah, you have A and B funding. So I referenced the 1999 law. And so in 2005, there was a lawsuit saying that IEFA was an unfunded mandate. And so the legislature had to put some money up to cover it. And so right now it's $23.28 per student or $100, whichever is greater. So obviously if some really small districts just get $100 if they only have a few students. But so this is money that you should be, your district should use for IEFA. We have a funding guide to kind of give you some ideas, but anytime, you're doing, you could send people to do PD, you could, buy some curriculum, you could invite like a tribal speaker in and pay him a stipend. Any of those kinds of things are things that you could do with this A and B funding. And administrators, if you go on to our school finance webpage on the OPI website, it's under the leadership. So it's kind of in the administrator's realm, but there is a way to find what your annual IEFA allotment is. And if you're ever interested, that's the thing that we can help you find too. We do occasionally have people that reach out to us and say, how much do we have for IEFA in this school? And we can look that up for you. So, but there is money out there to do this stuff. And I would really encourage you to look at the funding guide because it gives you, some good ideas of how to use that money. And we've got a lot of hub courses. Stephen, of course, grades the intro to IEFA, Indian Ed for All, and that's that's now required for all new licensures, which I think is a good thing. I grade the one on the framework. So when I was talking about the framework, there is a hub course associated with it. If you're interested in checking that out, I would encourage it. It's about, some people say it takes more than 4 hours, but it's rated as a four-hour course. But at the end, you just put together like a planning guide. So you can start to, in those 5 domains, you can start to kind of map out some things that you're going to do over the coming year. So I think it's good in that way. It just gives you an opportunity to kind of make a little plan that you can start to follow. Stephen also just, about last summer, I think we released the Bison Restoration and Tribal Sovereignty Hub course. Stephen grades that one. And then we have, this was facilitated, but it's the unpacking the essential understandings and building your IEFA mindset. Jennifer Statham worked with some folks on that one. And then I'm actually especially proud of this one because I'm a social studies guy, but I worked with our previous math content specialist, and we have a seamless integration of IEFA into mathematics. So I would encourage you to check that one out. What I love about that one is there's a video. It starts off with a video of an Annishanabe guy, and he's talking about how you build a lodge and how you set up the poles and you line them up with a North Star and why it's so important to have all the angles a certain way. But what's cool about it is in that video, he either references or demonstrates every single one of the mathematical practices that are in the Montana math standards. So it's a great reminder that all of the things that we want our students today to be doing in mathematics as far as mathematical practices, that indigenous people were doing those here for thousands of years. So that's another cool one. I'd check it out. And then Mike and I just finished not too long ago, one about teaching and learning about contemporary issues. And we thought it was a good idea because, those are great teachable moments for your students when different things come up in the news or, whatever about, like for example, what is it, about 2 years ago, we had a Supreme Court case in which the Fort Laramie Treaty of, I want to say 1858. Did I get that right, Mike?
1868.
68. Okay, I was off by 10 years. But the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty was upheld in the Supreme Court, and Crow hunting rights were in Wyoming were upheld by the Supreme Court. So, you know, those kinds of things are great opportunities, you know, to have teachable moments with your students for things that, you know, may have a little more relevance because they're going on, they're happening right now versus things that might have happened way in the past. So that's a great course. The only thing that we're having a little challenge with is you submit a lesson plan at the end, and a lot of people aren't putting a contemporary issue in there. So they have a great lesson, but they don't have a contemporary issue. So, but I would encourage you to check any and all of those out. Really proud of what we have to offer there. And then, yeah, we have, you know, we don't know exactly how much we'll have, but we will be offering a limited amount of grants next year for student exchanges. Those could be between native and non-native, or between, you know, schools on different reservations. We just recently had an exchange between Poplar and Harlem. So, you know, they're on different reservations, but again, we are big believers that if we just let students, you know, get together and get to know each other, that will carry a lot more weight than a lot of the things that adults say, or the things that are kind of flying around on, you know, in the media or whatever. So we really think that they're impactful. We have like Livingston and Pryor have been doing an exchange for a long time. Oh, we have Megan says my son and his class were part of this video. That's cool. So yeah, is your son from Livingston then? Oh, okay. Oh, that's Al. Oh, and Al, yeah, Al's here from Whitefish. He did an exchange with Polson this year, so shout out to Al. But we're gonna have those. We're gonna have those offered again next year, and we think it's a cool way to have students experience IEFA. So if you're interested in that, Jennifer Statham is the person in our office to reach out to. We are also working on an exchange guide. It'll be on our website in a couple months, and that will give you just, you know, more knowledge and information and resources as far as how do I set up a really good exchange that's going to work. So
Doesn't Jennifer have a webinar coming up about this?
Yes, thank you. Well, it's really a webinar, but part of it's just meet people, discuss ideas. There's actually two. There's one on Tuesday the 25th, I believe it's at 3:30, and there's also one on May 16th, same time. So thank you for reminding me about that, Mike. All right, well, I think that is where I hand the baton over to Mike Jetty.
Yeah, and thanks, Zach, for providing some of those how-to and the logistics and some of the more technical implementation strategies. But, you know, there's these standards that we have, and we shared these earlier, you know, map resources. But Stephen, he's going to give us a little tour of our website where you can find some of these resources to meet these standards. You know, where are the star stories at, and what lesson plans go along with them. And so he's gonna take us on a little tour. This is some stuff we covered earlier, but I'm gonna stop sharing, Stephen, and then you're gonna be able to pull up the website. But we're always updating this site and putting new things on it. And if you find good links, let us know. Like I just added a link last week to a Native American artist. And so I'll stop sharing, Stephen, and turn it over to you for taking us on a little website tour. But feel free to throw out questions in the chat as we go through this, and we'll try and do our best to answer them. But while Stephen's getting us up, one of the cool things that we've done to institutionalize Indian education for all is any new teacher has to take that Intro to Indian Ed for All class before they get their teaching license here. And so that's really cool to see. And as part of that course, they evaluate resources on our website. And so Stephen's got this big old spreadsheet of kind of like our top, you know, top resources that teachers are saying they like for Indian Ed for All. And so that's cool too. So we're always kind of getting feedback on what's working. So with that, Stephen, I'll stop talking here, and he's our webmaster for Indian Ed for All here, him and Joan Frankie. So show us what we got, Stephen.
Is that showing up on your guys' screens?
Yep.
Okay. As you guys are all familiar with OPI website, I'm just gonna walk through it. opi.mt.gov. You'll want to access the educators tab. And under educators, under teaching and learning, you'll go down to Indian Education for All. As we talked about it, I think we talked about it a little earlier. There's really 3 parts to Indian Ed for All. Indian Ed for All, Indian Student Achievement, and then Tribal Relations and Resiliency. I'm going to click on Indian Ed for All, and that's where Mike was talking about. I'm not a webmaster, but I'm responsible for a lot of stuff that goes on in here and updates and stuff. So if you go to the landing page, it's Indian Education for All. You'll see some of the more popular or links that might interest you. Most recently, the bottom one is Indian Education for All website tour, which I just did a quick 2-minute video that is hosted there. Some of you and most of you are probably already familiar with most of these tabs, but we change our video about every 3 weeks. And currently we just talk about Bessie explains tribal sovereignty. It'll be changing here next week. Meet the team. Obviously, you are all aware of Mike, myself, Zach, Jennifer, and I'm not sure if Joan's in today. Is she?
No, but
Okay.
but she's
And
on
then,
there.
one of the things Zach talked about was upcoming events and PD opportunities. So I'm just going to go in this order. When you click on that link, you're going to actually have opportunities for upcoming events. Like currently it's listed today's best practices that's happening while we speak. Upcoming PD offerings is a place where you can go if not just OPI, Indian Education is doing it, but other opportunities for upcoming summer I'm using opportunities too much, but it is opportunities for you guys to get out there and take part in this. And like Mike was saying earlier with Zoom world, how it became, we store everything on our website under the previously recorded PD offerings. So you could still take those and use them, and we will provide you for credit renewal units for your certificate. Also right here, which we don't always get too much of this. Most of the time we get emails or phone calls, or in opportunities like today or our in-person conference, we're requested to come and present to your staff, but we don't just do the staff. We also do administrators. We've done community members. We've also took part in school boards, tribal governments, and students. We're going to be doing students here in a few weeks for a summer school activity, but there are people that reach out for us to present to their students, which is always a lot of fun. Sometimes a little more challenging than teachers, just because.
Hey, Stephen, can I
Yes.
jump in there for just a second?
I apologize.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, like, those recorded PD offerings that Stephen was showing just a minute ago. So I was referencing like the unpacking the EUs and some of those. We have a great webinar series that Jordan Langford and Miranda Murray did, and all the essential understandings. We've got a great series on ethnobotany, that's all Montana tribal, like ethnobotanists, knowledge keepers on plants and medicine and all things indigenous science. We've got one on sovereignty. We've got one on boarding schools. So a lot of good content there that you can look at to strengthen your knowledge if you're not familiar with those things. And as Stephen referenced, you can get renewal units. You just have to, after you watch the video, you just you do a survey just so we know that you didn't just click on the video, watch it for 5 minutes and say, okay, I'm ready for my renewal unit. So
Yeah, one of the fun webinars I got to do was on tribal enrollment blood quantum. because it is an interesting issue for tribal nations that they're facing, and enrollment, and who uses blood quantum and who doesn't. But this summer I was in Butte, Montana, and I ran into a guy who had a necklace on with 5 of these old Indian head nickels. And I said, "Hey, what's the story behind your necklace?" He said, "I'm trying to be a quarter Indian." I tell that joke in the blood quantum video.
Whether you find it humorous or not, it's I feel like the more jokes or the more time you hear Mike's jokes, it becomes more funny. But then feature resources, I'm gonna give you guys, if you guys want to review that, it's just some of our more popular resources. And then classroom resources, which is really like all of the team, and plus, well, and we collaborate with teachers and professors and various people in the field to create a lot of these lessons that you'll see and hear. Is there any specific that I should mention? I know that earlier we talked about some of the more popular ones under language arts, and you could just, some of them might be Birthright, Code Talkers, pretty common ones that you might use in undergrad for NAS classes or American Indian or Montana government classes. Some mathematics, if you guys are out there that are math teachers that have some ideas with Indian Ed for All, we're always looking for more of those, as well as music. And most of you probably already collaborate with Jennifer, but she's a big science person. I'm working on a couple lessons with art and business that I'm hoping to complete in the coming days. And then videos, also very popular. And sometimes we just use links to other videos. Social studies is kind of what we have the most of, just because Mike and Zach are both previous history teachers or social studies teachers, but there's a lot in there. General information, I think Zach mentioned that a little bit, where you could find the guides. We're hoping to revamp this because there is some confusion in the field that say this is a spot that we need to figure out how to make this more accessible to the user, because it does have a lot of links, and a lot of those links have a lot of information, but we want to make it more robust for the teachers. And also, I guess I'll be updating a guide that I worked on with some, if you're uncomfortable teaching Indian Ed for All, or you haven't done it before and you want to jump in there, we have resources that are pretty easy to utilize. And you could find those underneath, I haven't looked for a while, but
So
it's
if you go to the landing page, Stephen.
okay. So we're always looking for advice, like since I do the website, if you guys have suggestions for that general information or any parts of the page, I'd be happy to hear them. Zach would as well, and just send us an email and we'll see what we can do. If the ideas, we just need more ideas because we've kind of hit a wall and we're hoping to revamp that. Go to the landing page, you said?
Yeah, so the document that, yeah, so Stephen actually put that together. So basically what it is Mike referenced it. So as he's doing, so on our website reflection on the Intro to IEFA hub course, people comment on their 5 resources, and then Stephen keeps track of that in a spreadsheet. And so this lists the ones that people talked about the most. So it's kind of like we're selling it based on popularity, I guess. But also looking at our download data. So what are people downloading off our website? So looking at those 2 things. So these are basically all grades, all subjects. If you don't do anything else, you can do these things, is kind of the idea. But we're going to try to build this out more and have more to it. But I would encourage you to check it out. But yeah, I mean, like I said, even if you haven't done IEFA or you're not sure what to do, you can use that document to find a few lessons and give them a try. Also real quick, because I know we're just about up. Yeah, we are up at time. You know, the IEFA in action page is a spot where we're trying to get schools to share stuff they're doing. So you can send us that, and we'd love to see what you're doing. But I guess we should probably leave at least a minute or two here for questions if there's questions.
Yeah, and
Right at the
real
time.
quickly, Zach was saying even actually just share a lesson. Current events are just happenings that are happening in Indian country, not just specifically to Montana, but some cool things that are happening. And as we're always pleased, and we don't get enough of it, evaluate a resource. If you ever use it, we'd love to hear your feedback, just like we'd love to hear your feedback about today's presentation. But yeah, as Zach was saying, if you guys have any questions, please better open the floor, I guess.
Yeah, type away.
And I apologize, it's so informal, but it would be so much easier if we were able to just share everybody's camera and raise your hand or something. Or
That's okay.
Well, you're welcome to reach out to us. You have our contact info and hit us up. And we've already got someone volunteering to be part of a IEFA focus group for our website. So thank you, Megan. Yeah, so if you want to help us out with lesson plans or give us feedback on our website or whatever, you know, this is a collaborative, ongoing journey, and we're all in it together. And so thanks for being a part of it with us. So I know we've got about a 10-minute break coming up, and our next presentation is going to be, who is our next presentation? Martha?
yeah, I believe so.
Martha Cole from the Historical Society. So yeah, they've got a ton of cool stuff. So come back and check out the MHS resources. So we will
Also,
take a 10-minute break. Oh, go ahead, Stephen.
just real quickly, also, we probably said it multiple times today, but feel free to reach out to any of the team. We're under the Meet the Team tab on our main landing page. We'll help you or try to help you and connect you with people that might be able to help you, that we might be unable to help you. But please, we're always taking requests.
All right, well, thanks. And we'll see you back here in 8 minutes.